Batchelder.
Well, I'm counting on you all to inspire me tonight. I think we all need some inspiration, although we've had some inspiration from the Republican primary. That's been a sideshow, and it seems to me like it can only come out one way. But, well, yes, I started volunteering at the Peace House in 1985 after a year of some trouble and being laid off from my job at the Omniplex Science Museum. And the Sisters of Benedict had started a little Justice and Peace office in Oklahoma City. And so I began to volunteer there. And in those days, in 1985 through 90, we were working on the issues of the Reagan administration, the wars in Central America, which we thought were unjust, and of course the United States was supporting the governments of El Salvador and Guatemala and opposing the government of Nicaragua. And the whole nuclear weapons buildup under the Reagan administration doubled nuclear weapons production in the United States, just about melted down most of our nuclear weapons production facilities, which was kind of ironic. Quite a lot of activity around those issues. And during the 90s, while there were no wars going on, we were able to lobby and support issues like foreign aid that makes a difference in the lives of developing countries, foreign aid that makes a difference in the lives of poor people in the United States, programs of Bread for the World and Results and Oxfam, and learned a lot about lobbying, letter writing, and organizing alerts to help people be effective in government in those years. We opposed the Persian Gulf War as best we could. Perhaps some of you did too. We were not effective in that. I remember the nation was almost giddy during the Persian Gulf War. We were excited about the prospect of an Al Gore presidency because of his environmental values, and were crushed when George W. Bush somehow managed to take over the White House. That's a whole drama. Like most of you, I've lived in a state of shock since the year 2000, as the U.S. has launched 2 wars and become a nation that participated in torture and exported millions of jobs that had supported families to countries with little or no protection for their workers or for their environment. Barack Obama's election, no help from Oklahoma, I'm afraid, filled all of us with high but unrealistic hopes. And like you, we've been pleased with many things that have been happening, but disappointed by others. Mostly, I'm so grateful that we're not living under the presidency of John McCain and Sarah Palin. Can you imagine how the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan would be going under their leadership? We might already be at war in Iran if they were the president and vice president. And none of the policies that we've been pleased to see implemented under the Barack Obama administration would ever have been passed. Now we lace up our shoes and get ready for the political year of 2012. And it's going to be a big one. Never has our passion for justice, compassion, peace, and environmental sustainability been more crucial to the process. Let's talk about vision, because as we know, we are sustained, people are sustained by a vision. We must be clear about our vision for America and for the world. Here is some of mine, and maybe it overlaps with some of yours. That all humanity is one family, and each of us is responsible in some way for the conditions that all others live in. Earth is our only home, and it is ours to destroy or to preserve. Nature is not only God's creation, and we are the stewards, but nature sustains us. And when we are destroying nature, we are destroying our sustaining source of air, food, water, and life itself. And yes, as current systems are underway, nature is threatened and being destroyed. Governments are the final protectors of the commons, that which belongs to all of us, the air, the land, the water, and the oceans, and this includes all the good things in society that we hold in common. Environmental protection cannot be a voluntary exercise. but can only result from regulation of activities affecting nature. Regardless of economic systems, the human potential for greed must be regulated so that honorable efforts by some businesses and industries will be protected from businesses and industries that operate without conscience, only for profit and with no other considerations. The Great Depression and the economic crash of 2008 both came about because of the affairs of banking, finance, mortgage lending, and Wall Street investing were insufficiently regulated to control the greed and avarice of a few that were willing to risk the whole system to make billions for themselves. And human dignity, the dignity of work, must be protected by government against the inevitable exploitation by business and industry that would treat human work as simply one more commodity like steel and aluminum. Public institutions serving people in society lift society above the law of the jungle into a place of opportunity for the development of every person's potential. Bill Moyers recently spoke in Oklahoma City. Did any of you get there? And he said, you know, we grew up very poor. We grew up during the Depression and the Dust Bowl in Texas. And we didn't know we were poor. But he said, I'm a product of public services. Public schools, public libraries, public roads, public bridges, public universities, public service in the military. And, of course, he's become quite successful. And that's the way it should be. There should be ladders of opportunity. I'm talking about what Democrats do here. In times of recession or depression, government must implement public works projects to build the things society needs. Roads, bridges, railroads, schools, libraries, state parks, national parks. Oklahoma's state parks were built by those programs, and so was the Civic Center Music Hall in Oklahoma City. The cornerstone says WPA, and it's still serving Oklahoma City. Now that's an investment in the future, much different from military spending, which is just money down a rat hole. And it is now known beyond doubt that burning fuel fossil fuels pump CO2 and other gases into the atmosphere that are warming the Earth's atmosphere and causing global warming. Government must make serious investments into the development of clean alternative energy sources, including solar, wind, ocean, geothermal, and policies must be implemented that encourage conservation and reduced reliance on fossil fuels. Of course, we have important personal choices to make, and many of us are making them already, on these issues. And government must address discrimination against classes of people and minorities by those in power so that there's justice and equal opportunity for all. And I would say humanity has outlived war, but just does not know it yet. And finally, the mere possession of nuclear weapons must be considered an abomination and a sin, and humanity must abolish nuclear weapons as well as war. Those are just some visions I have for the country and for the world, and they get me out of bed every morning to work on them. I share some of the words from a speech by the Reverend William Sloane Coffin, who was also the honorary chair of the Freeze campaign, which became the Sane Freeze campaign. I see some nodding heads. He said these things in 1989. That would be 23 years ago. The words of William Sloane Coffin. He said, the big news of the day is the world as a whole has to be managed, and not just its parts. 50 years ago, that would be 73 years ago now, it was enough to be concerned about the parts. In World War II, we worried that this part of the world could not protect itself from that part. Today it's the world, the whole world, that can't protect itself against its parts. In World War II, nations targeted one another. Today the whole world lives on the target of a world war. And global life is not threatened. This is 23 years ago, Sloane Coffin. Global life is not threatened by warfare alone. The radioactive waste that rose from the meltdown at Chernobyl, and today we can add the nuclear troubles in Japan, recognize no frontiers, and neither does acid rain. Every biological species suffers from the ravages of uncontrolled industrial pollution and from the devastation of the Amazonian rainforest. If developed and developing countries cannot bring industrial production into harmony with nature, then we may all literally be cooked. Instead of blasting ourselves into nuclear oblivion, we may simply bake slowly in a stew of industrial pollutants. In short, the planet is at risk and at an order of magnitude never previously imagined. So the world as a whole does have to be managed. We do indeed belong to one another, every one of us on the planet. For the survival unit in our time is no longer a single nation or a single anything. The survival unit in our time is the entire human race, plus the environment. As Pope John Paul said in 1981, from now on, it is only through a conscious choice and then deliberate policy that humanity can survive. Strong words, and it's kind of like, it still applies today. I mean, I don't think Senator Jim Inhofe would go along with any of that. It's all a hoax, right? There's no problems. We deserve to be proud of our Democratic Party. And I brought with me some copies of a booklet. I don't know if any of you have seen this one before. This is the Reverend Dr. Robin Myers of Mayflower Church in Oklahoma City gave the keynote address at the Carl Albert dinner in Oklahoma City. I was so impressed. I got the text, and with the help of Bob Lemon and some others, we got these booklets printed. You can take one as you leave. And I'm going to just refer to one of the last pages where he talks about those speeches in praise of the Democratic Party. So, Christian minister going out on a limb. Ours is the party of inclusion and compassion, of justice and reform, of multiculturalism and diversity. Ours is the party that gave the world the 8-hour workday and the weekend, Social Security, the minimum wage, the GI Bill of Rights, the Marshall Plan, NATO, the Peace Corps, Medicare, Medicaid, Operation Head Start, women's rights, civil rights, and now gay rights, clean water and clean air, the first man on the moon, workplace safety and compensation, unemployment compensation, rural electrification, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Federal Student Loan Program, the Securities and Exchange Commission, family and medical leave, the school lunch program, the Motor Voter Act, more police on the streets, and the last balanced budget and surplus at the end of a presidential term. Don't tell me that you can either be a Democrat or a Christian, but you can't be both. I shudder to think what this country would be without the accomplishments of the Democratic Party. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can agree that life is too short to live by illusions, and our country is too precious to be governed by idiots. Our kids matter too much to give them anything less than the best we can give them, and people are more important than corporations. In fact, despite the recent disastrous Supreme Court ruling, Citizens United, corporations are not actually people, and therefore do not actually have First Amendment rights. You can believe in God and evolution. You can support soldiers, but not the wars they're fighting in. You can be kind and gentle and patient and forgiving, for that should be the true Oklahoma spirit. If the odds seem long and the road seems steep, just remember the words of the great cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And that's us. That's you and me. So that was Robin Myers. And also, as good as the Democrats are, and that's attractive to us at our best, we know what Republicans always do. They always support policies that end up benefiting the 1%. not the 99%. They cut taxes, mostly benefiting the 1%. They want to cut or privatize Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They privatize prisons, which is an abomination because no one should have a vested interest in keeping prisons full, as though they were running a hotel or a Motel 6. They want to cut environmental protections. Several Republican candidates for president have said they would abolish the EPA, saying it's a job killer. What planet do they live on? They want to further deregulate the banks, mortgage industry, and Wall Street, the very deregulation that brought about the crash of 2008. They want to cut funding for public schools, and they support vouchers so that families sending their kids to private or religious schools can withdraw their support from public school systems. They oppose unions and support union-busting right-to-work laws. They would further cut the small portion of our small foreign aid budget that actually goes to helping the most impoverished people on the planet. They oppose women's right to reproductive choices in contraception, birth control, and abortion services, passing draconian laws like Oklahoma's sonogram bill, requiring a transvaginal sonogram 1 hour before receiving an abortion, no exceptions for minors, rape, or incest. We don't even need to say pro-choice. It's really pro-conscience, and the government should not be making those decisions. They support the National Rifle Association's freedom to own assault weapons mentality and call anyone who would regulate any guns at all a lily-livered threat to American values. They suppress scientific realities, still claiming that climate change science is a hoax invented by people who hate capitalism and business. Read this issue of the Peace Strategy newspaper reporting the scientific community's virtually total agreement that human activity is causing global warming. It's one of the articles in the latest issue, which you can take free after the program. And I think most of the Republican presidential candidates raised their hands when they were asked, who does not believe in evolution? They engage in active voter suppression tactics to make it more difficult for likely Democratic voters to vote. They engage in divisive and distorted rhetoric about Muslims, homosexuals, and Hispanics to curry favor among poorly informed voters. And Oklahoma's affirmative action policies are under attack with State Question 759 that will be on all of our ballots in November. More about that in a moment. They preach religiosity as though they had half an understanding of what the life of Jesus of Nazareth was really about. Jesus spoke more about the spiritual dangers of being rich and the disparity of wealth between rich and poor and compassion for the poor than any other subject. How can anyone act like Newt Gingrich or Glenn Beck and profess to be a Christian? Their vision for America must be something like El Salvador, where 5% of the population own or control business, the army, the police, and the government, and 95% of the people eke out a living on poverty wages. They always support everything military, regardless of cost, and make bellicose statements about foreign policy that lead to war. Right now, Republicans are insinuating that President Obama is weak on defense because he suggests cutting our bloated military budget and, God forbid, trying to negotiate a peaceful settlement of issues relating to Iran's nuclear power reactors. Republicans sound as though another war would be a good idea. I am meeting with an Iran working group tomorrow morning on an essay we hope to be published widely, calling for cooler heads and mature negotiations in the Iran dialogue. They, the Republicans, and the shock jocks on Fox radio resort to outright lies, disinformation, and misinformation to instill fear in Americans and distort reality. Studies show that people whose primary news source is Fox radio and TV actually know less than people who have no news source at all. That's because Fox listeners believe many things that are simply untrue. And they vote, Republicans who are elected, vote in lockstep with their party, knowing that they will be severely reprimanded by their party if they don't. I have found Republican Representative Frank Lucas to be an honorable man who listens to constituents and sometimes even supports a bill that I or others have brought to him. But if the voting records of the Oklahoma delegation of Republicans are compared, as they are by Operation Vote Smart, perhaps you've seen their literature, there's very little difference in their votes. They are of one mind in their one party. So if you elect a Republican, you get a Republican, no matter whether he's a nice person or a turd. So the choices in the elections are clear. And though no candidate will ever support the agenda I would support, I always know who's better and who's worse. And we had all better vote for whoever is better, or we will always be governed by those who are worse. So what can we do? Well, we know this. They have more money. But we have more people and more motivation to get the word out. We must make big money in electoral campaigns a liability and warn voters not to support candidates heavily funded by the 1%. Ideas which many of you are probably doing and have been doing maybe for decades is we must have conversations with people face to face outside of our regular circles and make our case about candidates, because they're going to listen to the media and we can't do anything about that. But we can't just talk with ourselves and win the elections we need to win. Somehow or other, we've got to get out there and meet other people and let them meet us. We can leaflet in public places. I'm sure you've done it. You've probably petitioned. We can walk neighborhoods with a personal leaflet. Make my own leaflet and go door to door. I should know the boundaries of my precinct. Perhaps all of you do. Who knows Victor Gorin in Oklahoma City? Well, Victor Gorin is unique. You know, I wouldn't go as far as to say he's a flaming queen, but he might. Yeah, he's got beautiful long blonde hair, and almost no one wonders whether he's a little bit different from something. And Victor walks his precinct. During the final month before an election, he makes up his own letter, and it says, "Dear neighbor, I just hope you'll vote in November, whatever the dates are. And I want you to know who I'm going to vote for." And he puts down the candidates he's going to vote for. And I don't know what else he says. It's a simple leaflet, and he delivers it to every house in its precinct the last month before the election. And in his precinct, his candidates win. Now, if Victor Gorin can do it, you know, you might think, Jesus, if Victor's supporting the candidate, they don't have a chance. Well, it's not true. Human beings like human beings. And somebody who goes door to door and says, you know, I just hope you vote. Whoever you vote for is your business. This is who I'm voting for, and I live down there in the red house, you know. I think people are desperate for information. And I think they're desperate for human contact. Because we don't live in a human contact world anymore. Everybody's got screens, you know. People sit at a table together and text one another. So that's, I think, a key to victory. And we can register voters, particularly minorities, who have so much at stake in the outcome of elections. And all the get out the vote campaign stuff. You know, the get out the vote stuff is oftentimes just calling lists of people that are registered to vote and who voted in the last election. Well, sometimes I feel like I want to work outside of that. You know, I want more people to vote. You know, people who voted in the last election are probably going to vote in this one too, you know. I get 3 or 4 calls before an election, you know. I will, I am, I did, you know. And I want to find more people, you know, the ones who could vote but but don't, you know. And State Question 759 presents a huge opportunity. And I want to talk about that just a little bit. You may know, everybody who knows that there is a State Question 759, raise your hand. It's interesting. It was, of course, passed by the party that starts with an R. And you remember that they did pass this legislation that went on the ballot to ban gay marriage forever in Oklahoma. Made it part of our Constitution. It was already illegal, but they knew darn well that that was going to get votes for their candidates. And that was a strategy. I don't think they care one way or another about gay marriage, but they knew that that would get their friends in the pulpit to get people to get out to vote, and it did. I mean, that's when the turn came, and Democrats lost the House and Senate, and Republicans gained it. We were walking the halls warning them, don't you see this as a Trojan horse to, well, I think we should give people the chance to vote, you know. Well, good idea. So that worked so well, they came back with the Sharia law vote. You know, we're going to ban Sharia law from Oklahoma courts. We better do that. Muslims. And never been used in Oklahoma courts. Nobody ever had the idea. They didn't pass a resolution to ban Catholic law in Oklahoma courts. But, I mean, it's, you know, it's about this. But, of course, that passed by 70%, and it elected, every statewide office became Republican as a result. Well, they know a good thing when they see it. So now we have State Question 759. What it will do is nullify affirmative action in Oklahoma. And it's even insidiously worded. It says, the state of Oklahoma will not give preferred treatment to any group. Well, it sounds pretty reasonable. But of course, affirmative action policies don't give anybody preferred treatment. Affirmative action policies in Oklahoma are voluntary compliance policies. State agencies that may do hiring and contracting, or universities that may accept students, state agencies that deal with the people, they're required once a year to submit a plan for moving in the direction of fairness to all of the categories of people who are protected by the affirmative action statutes. And it's their own plan. And if they don't meet their own goals, that's okay. It's all voluntary compliance. There's no mandates, no quotas, no set-asides, nothing. That's Oklahoma's affirmative action policy. And we're going to vote in November to nullify it because it gives preferred treatment to somebody. You know, I mean, I think we're talking, you know, about racial issues or something. Of course, as everyone knows, the greatest beneficiaries of affirmative action policies are women. And most women are white women, so that's the largest beneficiary group. And I think all minorities should vote on this, all women should vote on this, and all allies of equal rights should vote on this. This could backfire on the Republicans. This could blow up in their face if we start the conversation and if we spread the word. I'm a member, I'm actually the chair, of the Central Oklahoma Human Rights Alliance, COHRA, we say CORA. And the Central Oklahoma Human Rights Alliance has prepared a resolution on State Question 759 urging people to vote no on State Question 759 to save and preserve affirmative action in Oklahoma. It's educational in nature, that's the point, and it could be given to a church, a house of worship, a business, an organization, a club, a high school class, anybody could sign the resolution and return it to CORA. The address is down here, or you can email the group and name that signed it, and we'll put it on the list. I think we have about 30 in already. We hope to get hundreds and hundreds of churches, organizations, businesses, whatever, to return this resolution. And it says at the bottom of the educational paragraphs, which I summarized, this organization, institution, corporation, or house of worship supports the American dream of equal consideration and fair treatment of all people regardless of differences. We support affirmative action policies and encourage citizens and our members to vote no on State Question 759. Now, if this gets a little play all over the state, which we're trying to get, wouldn't it be interesting? See, I think this will bring Democrats to the polls. Just like they thought Muslim, that Sharia law thing, that's going to get their voters to the polls. I think this is going to get Democrats to the polls. So I can leave 100 here, modest fellow that I am. And then also, I have these. And this is a tiny little 4-to-a-page leaflet saying vote no on State Question 759. We must vote in November. And it says spread the word, start the conversation. State Question 759 would repeal and reverse affirmative action policies in Oklahoma. And, we must not go back to the old days of discrimination. And a person can take this to any copy shop or a midnight copy shop where you work and make some copies, cut it up into 4s, and give it to people. Start the conversation, Before November, everybody in the state ought to know what 759 is all about and be rounding up people to go with them in their car to go and vote. And if we get people to turn out in large numbers to vote no on State Question 759, we're going to elect a couple of representatives and senators too. So I think there's a possibility of spillover on that. So I'm kind of excited about both of those campaigns. And I hope that's not all stuff you're working on anywhere. This is an interesting editorial from the New York Times yesterday. I only have about 10 copies, but it's a suggestion that Joe Biden, maybe Hillary wants to take a rest and write a book and see what Chelsea's doing. So she might step down from Secretary of State. Joe Biden could take on Secretary of State because he's a talented fellow. And then President Obama could announce that Hillary Clinton is going to be his vice presidential running mate in the 2012 elections. I just think it's a great idea. I think it would be a huge victory. And it'd be great to have her in the White House helping him along or kicking his butt. And I think she knows how to fight. And he's learning. But I'll leave these here as well. And, well, this is just one copy of the essay that I'm helping to write about avoiding war in Iran. I really feel confident that if Israel attacks Iran, the United States will be immediately drawn in. There'll be no way we cannot be drawn in. And that would be catastrophic. Iran has 4 times the population of Iraq. So it would not be a cakewalk. And, Iran would appeal to Russia to help them. Well, just imagine if we have a regional war with the U.S. on one side and Russia on the other. I think our economy and the recovery would be destroyed. I think gasoline would go up another $1 or more per gallon. And all our hopes and dreams would be smashed. But it would make a lot of money for the 1%, which is what the other wars have done. If somebody always wants to go to war, and I think most of us remember Dick Cheney saying that the war in Iraq, he was asked, do you think the American people are ready to support another war 12,000 miles away? And he said, I think this war is just going to last 6 weeks. And U.S. troops are going to be welcomed with flowers as liberators. Well, that wasn't quite right. But, here's Bill. Maybe some of you saw this issue of Newsweek. He's got about 20 suggestions for economic stimulus, federal jobs programs, putting people to work to build the things America needs, retrofitting buildings so that they save energy and are more energy efficient. He said, for God's sake, think of all the buildings in cities all over America that have a black tar roof. Hell, you put people to work painting those roofs white, and that building's energy bills will go down 20% just by painting the roofs white. If you get into double pane glass and insulation and a few other things, you can really save big money. And these are things the federal government should be doing, right? I mean, it worked for Franklin Roosevelt during the Depression. Let's do it now. It's what we need. And it's a hard fight because, you know, the 1% has a lot of money. And David Koch and all those multi-billionaires, they're pumping money into all kinds of secret little foundations that they've started to support this and lobby for that. And it looks like there's a whole groundswell of people. I heard Rush Limbaugh yesterday talk about there's some pharmaceutical product that is now in question because the research was fabricated. He says, well, maybe they can put those researchers to work on global warming. We know all of that research was fabricated. And he's saying that in 2012, you know. What planet is he living on? You know, it's hard to believe. Well, I've talked more than a half an hour. Shame on me. And let's talk together.